Hey ladies, it's Julie Barnhill again, and it appears that our DVDs are not wanting to make their way over to Canada in the appropriate time frame. So I'm dropping in today. I'm going to speak to you 3 little 10-minute sessions that can expand a little bit on what we talked about last week when we met on the subject of She's Gonna Blow, Real Help for Moms Dealing with Anger. So I'm going to recap real quickly for those of you who weren't here, and hopefully you'll be able to have some really good, strong conversation with one another. And let me just preface all of this by repeating again what I said last week, which is this. There has to be a place of trust. There has to be a place where with the women that are meeting and the moms that are meeting and talking today, that what is spoken about is kept right there. It goes no further. There's nothing alluded to on Facebook posts or in conversations, and none of that. You know how we do sometimes. It's like, well, you know, a friend told me one time. And sometimes it's not too hard to figure out who that friend was. So I really want to encourage you to talk about these things, tell your story, but let it stay where you are today. And if you speak about it outside of this meeting place, then let it be your story and your story only that you talk about. So we likened anger last week, the picture of it, to a volcano, that at different time as moms, that this volcanic anger, this magma begins to rise within us, and it spews out this lava, and it can spew out verbally, physically, emotionally, you know, spiritually, relationally, about any way you can think of it. In the totality of our life as a mom, it can definitely pour out. So what we want to do is we want to move away from that. We want to be able to have more peace in our home, more joy, more laughter, and a lot fewer days than when we go to bed wondering, why did I have children? What was I thinking? Because, you know, sometimes we can say that in jest, but many times we say that and we really truly are thinking, why did I have children? Because we are so surprised and disappointed, ashamed even, about the kind of mother that we're turning out to be. So I want you to know that you're not alone, that I've spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, and certainly have heard from thousands of moms. This book, She's Gonna Blow, has sold, you know, close to 200,000 copies, I believe. And as long as there are children, there will be hacked off moms. That's what I like to say. So we want to really examine these areas. So we're this little volcano, and our magma begins to build inside of us. And why is that? And I really clicked through things last week, trying to get everything, you know, a book, you know, this size into 45 minutes, and it's difficult to do that. So I was actually kind of glad when Allie called in desperation and said that the DVDs weren't there yet, because this gives me an opportunity to speak a little, expand more on some of the things I spoke about, and to also give you opportunity to process things, because those of you who were here last week, some of those words really struck home. And for some of you, you're thinking, I don't have a problem, and she has a problem. And it may not hit you. You know, you actually, last week may have been great, and then in the 7 days since then, you've been like, oh my gosh, I so can relate to that Mount Mama picture thing, more so than I did last week. So that's good. That's where we've been. And we want to talk about what to do, how to wrap our brain and our heart around that. Here's the first thing that I want you to discuss when I close up this certain session, is I want you to talk about how you dealt with anger, how you dealt with frustration and accumulated feelings like that when you were younger. And I want you to really think about the tone of the home that you grew up in. Now, this is not a dump session. This is not a, oh, it's all my mom's fault, and it's all my dad's fault, you know, that type of thing. We certainly want to look at our history. We certainly want to examine ruts of behavior that we get into as a result of the families that we live with in our growing up years. But we do that in order to self-examine ourselves and to be more aware of how and why we're reacting the way we are in our own home. So what kind of home did you grow up in? What was the tone? Now, I'll tell you a little bit of my story. I was adopted at age 4.5, nearly 5 years old. My parents were in their 40s. I was an only child, so I went from being one of 7 children in a biological family to an only child in a home that they loved me, adored me, and really was pretty idyllic in a lot of ways. But here's one of the realities. No one ever got mad in my family. I mean, no one got hacked off. My mom never was like, Norman, what are you thinking? You know, it was never that. This is how my parents dealt with anger. And then they left the room. You know what I'm saying? The conversation, I mean, it was never expressed in any way other than maybe a snippy little remark, a little parting shot as you walked out of the room, but never openly discussed. And in fact, my mother has said many times over the years, you know, your daddy and I, we've just never fought. You know, we just have never had a fight. I'm like, whatever, you know. You have been upset with Dad. You have been angry. You just haven't put it out there. You haven't really expressed it. So I grew up in a home that was really about suppressing those emotions. Now, no one said you're not allowed to feel that way, but it certainly was, it didn't take a real Einstein to figure out, these two people are a little uncomfortable with really vibrant expressions of emotion. So I kind of played that game, very much so. I was a pretty easy, I wanted to please my parents too as a child, so I didn't rock the boat any more than I, needed to. But here's the thing. Here's what I want you to think about this. See, I didn't name my emotions growing up. When I got into my teen years and was really struggling with some things, more my junior high years actually, I would bite myself. And this is the strangest thing. And when I heard about cutting several years ago, I thought, you know what? That's kind of what I was doing in a way. And I even have this, you can't see it, but I have this scar on my wrist right here. And it's actually, it's my teeth. I mean, it's my teeth marks that I was so angry with my mother in junior high, and I just didn't have any way to express it. And so I bit myself until I bled. Now, not real healthy. Not a real healthy rut to get into. So I take that and I go through high school and go through college and I have children, and voila, what do you know? I start having these emotions and not knowing, really out of ignorance, not being taught, not really having it demonstrated to me about, okay, anger, you may have heard this, it's neither right or wrong, it's the expression where we err, the expression of our anger that becomes sin. And really I fell into that boat, but I didn't even know what to do with little climbing irritations and those pressing frustrations that would bear down on me in my life. So what about you? What kind of home did you grow up in? Were you penalized for showing anger, or was that the way you got attention? Was through expression and being loud and being very dominant, and maybe there was a pecking order with siblings. Perhaps you were one of 7 instead of being the only like me. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about how you've processed anger, and really what do you really believe about being angry? Is it wrong? And if you are a Christian, is it sinful for you to be angry as a Christian? And if it is, then what are you supposed to do with it? And if it isn't, then why do you feel so lousy? I mean, what's that all about? These are really the things I want you to talk about in the next few minutes. And I think it's a way also for us to get to know one another and to tell our story, because this is the thing, see, one of the key things that we have to learn to do as moms, and especially with you're a lot younger probably than I am. I'm in my mid to going into my late 40s, and it's making assumptions about one another as moms. And the mom that's got it all together, and oh, she's great, her kids are great, her husband's great, her life is great, I'm so happy for her. And sometimes just a sadness when we make assumptions. But everyone has a story. And the only way we're going to learn one another's story is by hearing one another's story. So I'd like you to go back into your groups or in your group as a whole. And Allie, I would like for you to simply ask the ladies, I want you to say to them, tell me your story. And tell your story when it comes to where your anger has been and recognizing where you come from as a family unit in that.